Okay, so let me share my screen. All right. Okay, so just remembering back to last Friday, last time I saw you guys, I thought we had a really nice discussion. It was the first time we tried to do a Zoom discussion, and several of you participated. I kind of felt like several people were actually engaged in listening. So I really enjoyed the discussion. And out of our discussion came our statement of our main idea. And since our discussion, I went back and looked at the assignment from earlier in the week when you guys did your main idea statements. And I found that those main idea statements were all over the place. And some people got a little something about the influence of hip hop, but a lot of people really focused on a small detail and then made that the main idea. Now, remember, a main idea has to be something that covers the whole article, not just a small portion of it. So for example, someone said they thought the main idea was him telling about the nightmare of his daughter dating a rapper. Well, that was just one small little part of the article. And so it may be evidence that supports the main idea, but for it to be a main idea, it's got to cover everything that's in the article. And so because that your guys' original ideas of main idea are so different, I want to make sure that we emphasize that this is the main idea that we were working with in class. Okay, and if you were to, for some reason, disagree with me that you don't think that's the main idea, I would very much welcome that discussion. You could state your case. You would provide what you think is the main idea, the alternative. Then we would look at your supporting evidence, and then we could evaluate. We could evaluate your idea versus, this main idea that we're going with. So, like I said, I would totally value that discussion. We could even make it a little debate, just a very respectful debate. So I always appreciate your guys' discussion on that. So, but unless you disagree with this and want to share why, this is the main idea statement that everybody should go with. If your main idea is different from this, it's going to lead to trouble later on, okay? Because you'll possibly have an idea that you don't know how to defend. You don't have sufficient evidence to defend it. All right, so our main idea: adults should start paying attention to the message of hip hop because it has become a global influence. Okay, now, does anywhere in this statement say that adults should like hip hop?
No.
No, that they should come to embrace the message in the same way that James McBride has. Not really. It's just we need to understand the message because of its influence. All right, so that's what we're developing. Okay, now, what we're going to do today is we're going to evaluate the evidence. And then next time I see you guys, you'll be picking a side, either agree with him or disagree. So if you just kind of scan the page, I want you to have 5 pieces of evidence. And then you're going to say why you agree or disagree with that evidence and why, okay? Why you either believe it to be true or why you don't believe it to be true. Now, remember early on in the process, I said, when we were simply trying to understand his idea, we're not bringing in our own opinions, we're not bringing in our cultural values, we're not bringing in our experience, we're not bringing in any of those things. We just want to use what he's written to understand his message. Okay, so now that we understand the message, now we are going to start evaluating it, okay? And now this is where your opinion, this is where your worldview, this is where your experience comes into play, okay? This is where your experience and your ideas, your opinions, this is where it matters. This is the part of the process where that starts to matter. Okay, now, I also noticed that your guys' understanding of evidence needs a little work, needs a little refinement. So basically, when we're talking about evidence, we're talking about either a specific reference or even a quote from the article. Okay, so it's still got to be something that comes directly from the article. So let me give you an example, and I'm going to use the same one that I did last week that I used to preview what we would be doing today. Okay, so here is our original article, Hip Hop Planet. Okay, and I'm going to skip all the way down to paragraph 11, and I'm going to use that whole violence argument. And I'm using this to demonstrate how to do the paper today. All right, now let's take this. To confess a love for music that at least in part embraces violence is no easy matter. But then again, our national anthem talks about bombs bursting in air, and I love that song too. Okay, so now that we're doing this on computer and not writing by hand, copying quotes is about as easy as it gets. Okay, so I'm going to go to my keyboard. I'm going to do Control-C. All right, or you could go up to Edit and do Copy, but I'm going to do Control-C, and then I'm going to go back to our paper, and under Evidence, I'm going to do Control-V, and I'm going to copy and paste it. Okay. Now, this is a direct quote. Since it's a direct quote, I'm going to put quote marks around it. And what I want you to notice is that the punctuation at the end of the quote, the period, or if it's a question mark, or if it's a comma because you're not ending the sentence, the punctuation goes inside the quote, just like that. And then what I'm going to do, just to make it easy for myself later, I'm going to put in parentheses where it came from. Paragraph 11. All right. So that is a specific detail. It is a direct quote. Now, there may be some details that are too long to quote. You know, you don't want to quote an entire paragraph. That's just too long. Okay, so I'll cover that next. Let's just stick with this right now. So paragraph 11. Okay, now what I write here is why I agree or disagree with it and why. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you my actual opinion on this, and you don't have to agree with my opinion. You are a free human, and you are free to have your own opinion, and I'm not going to try and change your mind. I'm just going to write something that I actually believe because I want you to write what you actually believe, right? So I'm going to demonstrate it. But remember, you are 100% free to not agree with me, all right? Okay, so I disagree with this statement. Now, James McBride is entitled to his opinion as well. I'm not saying, James McBride, you are wrong. I'm just saying what I'm writing what I don't like about this statement, okay? And just like you're free to have an opinion, so is he, right? Okay, so what I don't like about this statement is that I don't think the two types of violence are the same. I don't think street violence is qualitatively the same as the violence mentioned in the Declaration, in the national anthem. Okay, and the biggest reason I don't agree with it is because at that point, those men were defending themselves. They were attacked, and I just think it's a fundamental right of people to defend themselves if they're being attacked. And after they declared that they wanted to be a free nation, England attacked, okay? So they declared war on us. So for all those reasons, I don't equate those same types of violence. So that's what I'm going to write, okay? I don't think this is a valid a point because the two types of violence are not really comparable. Street violence is almost always aggressive and is done for selfish reasons. The men defending the fort that Francis Scott Key was writing about were attacked by the British Navy on their own homeland. Okay, now that's a fairly detailed reason. And that's the kind of thinking that I want you guys to apply to this. I want you to be fairly detailed in the way you express yourself. Now, if I was writing a paragraph based on this, I might even go into more detail. But this is basically a note, like just a quick explanation of why I disagree with this statement. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. Do you guys have any questions on what I just did, or do you understand it pretty well? Give me a thumbs up if you understand it pretty well. Okay. All right. Give me a one of these if you still don't quite get it. Okay. All right. Give me a one of these, just, to let me know you're having fun today. All right, let me share my screen again. All right, so now I want you to note the difference between the evidence that I provided in a direct quote versus what you may have put on that last assignment. Okay, a lot of times what people put on their evidence was maybe a little summary or something like that, and it wasn't really very direct. Okay, now I want to give you an example of a piece of evidence that is not a direct quote. So let's go back to the text. All right. I think I'm trying to find a good piece of evidence here. Okay, I'm going to go in the same paragraph. All right, at its best, hip hop lays bare the empty moral cupboard that is our generation's legacy. This music that once made visible the inner culture of America's greatest social problem, its legacy of slavery, has taken the dream deferred to a global scale. Okay, I'm just going to explain that idea, and I'm not going to do a direct quote. All right, so let's see. McBride says that hip hop reveals problems in the inner city that his generation ignored and failed to fix. Okay, so now I'm referring to something that he said, and it's pretty specific. It's just not a direct quote. Okay, and the reason that I might do this time instead of just doing another direct quote is that direct quote was difficult to explain. Okay, and so I figured that as my evidence, just writing the explanation of it might even be more efficient. Okay, so I also disagree with this. Okay, and so I'll explain why, and then I'll write it. Our generation did not ignore it. Our generation and the generation before us, like maybe our parents' generation, they've been doing all sorts of government programs to try and address problems in the inner city. They've been doing that for decades. Okay, and so the problem is the things that they've done haven't worked. Okay, and that's a very different problem. If you try to do something and it fails, then you can learn from that. Hopefully you learn from that and you don't just keep perpetuating the same problem again and again, or keep trying the same solution that just doesn't work. That's very different from never trying to do anything at all, simply ignoring it. In fact, I think these problems, we've spent a ton of time and money on these problems, and the solutions that people in charge have come up with simply haven't worked. So I agree with him that these problems are real. I just don't agree that our generation has ignored them. Okay, it may be even worse. Like maybe we just haven't been smart enough to figure it out. Okay, so I'm going to explain why I disagree. I disagree that our generation has ignored problems of the inner city. I think we have spent a lot of time and what happened here? Sorry, guys, I don't know what happened to my screen here. I hate it when it does that. All right. Let's see. Sorry about that. I'll get back to this. I disagree that our generation has ignored the problems of the inner city. I think we have spent a lot of time and money on these problems, but they have not been solved. The problem is that our solutions have failed. Okay, so again, you guys don't have to agree or disagree with me. I'm just trying to demonstrate, how to take a detail and then think about it. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? These are two details that he uses to support his main idea. And so do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? And why? And this is where your worldview, your experience, and all that stuff comes in. Okay, so basically, guys, I've given you two pieces of evidence and an explanation. If you agree with me, you are welcome to keep these. If you disagree with me, you can still use the quotes, but you'll have to change that, okay? Because I want the agree or disagree and the explanation of why, I want that to reflect what you really think, what you really believe. So you can keep my evidence, but I want you to make this next part your own, original. And if you really like my ideas, you can borrow my ideas. I would encourage you to kind of rewrite it in your own words. But if you disagree with me, then you have to just totally erase it and start over again. Okay, now you'll notice there's slots for 3 more pieces of evidence, 3, 4, and 5. So that's what your assignment is to finish this document. And you've got to come up with 3 more pieces of evidence. Okay, are there any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to stop recording.